And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Space and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, March 4th, 7 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Cinemasters Reviews. Normally, we usually like to review 2 movies every week. This one, we only got 1, but oh boy, do we have a movie, because we are reviewing, in my opinion, not to tip my hat, my most anticipated movie of 2024, unless the only thing I can see surpassing is if Paul Thomas Anderson's movie is announced for later in the year. But right now, we're going to say this is my most anticipated. And joining me to review, about a year ago, he said, hey, when this movie comes out, I want to be your guest. And writer's strike, we fought through a writer's strike. 5 months later, here we are. Jake Meltzer, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you for remembering that, because yeah, like you, this was my most anticipated movie of both 2023 and 2024. So yeah, to say it's been a long time coming is putting it mildly. I'm very excited and very flattered to be here for such a momentous event. I mean, this is like the movie for a while. Like, yeah, I don't think there's any like big tentpoles like this level coming out for a long time. So
no, 100%. Like walking into this movie and like viewing it, I was like, we are viewing something big. Like we are viewing like an event, and it's always fun when like you realize like, oh, this is something that's going to be remembered for a while. I say we jump right into a review. Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. This is the sequel to Dune, the 2021 film, as well as just the adaptation of the second half of the novel written by Frank Herbert, legendary sci-fi book. This picks up right where the first movie left off, where Paul Atreides has now sort of adopted his role as the leader of the Fremen, and he now wants to take revenge on the Harkonnens for killing his father and for taking control of Arrakis. The Harkonnens are going to be trying to be fighting it back against Paul. Their new warrior is Fade Routha, played by Austin Butler, new villain. Brilliant. Yeah, we will get into him. Also, we learned that maybe the Emperor of Arrakis may have been behind some certain things. Jake, before we jump into the review, I want to ask, what is your history and knowledge with Dune as a property as a whole, quickly, but also mainly like what was your feelings about the previous film?
Okay, so I read the first Dune book in 2019, I think, when they announced that it was getting made again and that Denis Villeneuve was going to be the person to bring it to screen. I was a big fan of his, coming off of 2 great sci-fi movies, Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. So I was very interested in the book to be like this seminal sci-fi property that I had never read. Is like one of the most influential books ever. And I found myself like compelled while reading it, but also was like, wow, this is one of the densest things I have ever read. Like we were talking a little bit before we went on camera. I had to consult the glossary repeatedly while I was reading because there's so much lore and so much terminology, and Frank Herbert, the writer, does not hold your hand through it. There are some exposition dumps, but it's still like you just got to know these terms or you're just going to have to go to the glossary. And so going into Dune Part 1, I was like, how are they going to make this palatable for non-readers? Because there's so much lore there. And I think they did an amazing job. Like, it was Dune Part 1 was in my top 5 of 2021. And I think it was the first movie. It's not that I hadn't been to theaters before that. Coming off of COVID, I had seen stuff in the movie theater, but that was really the first movie where I was like, oh, this is like an event. We are back. And it was just an all-time technological achievement. Everything from a production standpoint, effects, sets, costumes, Hans Zimmer doing some of the best work of his career with his Academy Award-winning score. It just was immersive in a way that few movies had been for a while. And as a result, I was like, I can't wait for part 2. If it's this good, then we have something special on our hands. And like you said, waited a little longer than I would have anticipated, but the entire creative team coming back, I was like, okay, I think this could be special. And sure enough.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's funny. My first introduction into the world of Dune was the 2021 film. I had not read the book previously. I had not seen the 80s film. I now have. I've now read the book. I've now seen that movie. And going to that movie,
the 80s movie. I'm curious. I've heard it's bad, but I'm curious all the same.
So just real quick on that movie. That is a movie where I wish it would have actually been weirder. Like, you can tell that David Lynch wanted to get into the weird elements, but he felt very constricted to try and make this more palatable. And it's maybe the only time in David Lynch's career where you can clearly tell he's trying to dumb down his like filmmaking language, and it just does not feel natural, like, at all. And in my opinion, I think the worst thing about that movie is I'm just bored to tears while watching it. And that is something that I think Denis Villeneuve, he threaded that needle so perfectly with the 2021 film, where he's taking these huge concepts and huge themes of like political like discourse and like fighting for like the like this like rich element throughout the galaxy, but is able to make it so that anyone can enjoy it because the filmmaking is so grand, and like anyone can see how technically impressive it is. Rewatching Dune again, I cannot tell you how much I love the score by Hans Zimmer. I think it completely deserved its Oscar. And it's funny, I was talking with friends, and I honestly think reading the book, I was like, oh, this would be like, what if the Star Wars prequels were good? Because like they're having these large discourse about like, oh, this like trade federation and like, oh, whoever controls the spice controls the universe. And I think like in a book form, I think that's a lot more interesting than watching it on film. But Villeneuve was able to capture that feeling so well. And yeah, I think it ended in such a great way, and setting up the second movie in such a perfect way. And Jake, I'm right there with you. I think Dune Part 2 takes everything that was great about Dune Part 1 and improves it. This is one of, if Dune, like you, was one of my top 5 movies of 2021, I don't see this movie not being one of my top 5 movies of 2024, because I absolutely adored it. And I think Denis Villeneuve just cemented himself as one of the great directors, not just of this generation, but arguably of all time. Jake, what did you think about Dune Part 2?
So, in my Letterboxd review at the end of Part 1, when I first saw Part 1, I said that Denis Villeneuve is the best blockbuster director we have, and that he is the Muad'Dib of cinema. That has not changed with Dune Part 2. If anything, that is only more solidified. And yeah, I just was in awe at multiple points throughout the movie, just because of the visuals. And I don't know how spoilery we can get here.
Let's keep it mild. Let's keep it mild. I do have a spoiler tag if you really want to talk about something, but let's keep it fair.
Okay. I can keep it fairly vague. There's one scene in particular towards the end when it's like a big battle, and when the big battle starts, my jaw hit the floor. Like, let's just say it involves sandworms.
Yes.
To me, that was, and I hate to be one of those people who quotes my Letterboxd. That is this generation's version of the Rohirrim riding into Helm's Deep. Like, yes. That is the feeling that I had watching that. I was like, this is special. This is capital C cinema. This is why we go to see movies on the biggest screen possible. That is why the theatrical experience is so important, is because we get moments like this. And even before this, like, you get Paul's first ride on the worm, which is hinted at in the trailer. That's kind of the first like mic drop moment for the movie, which was I was already hooked anyway, but that is really just like a perfect marriage of CGI, and the CGI looks incredible. It's just like everything comes together so well. And yeah, there's just, and even the Fade Ralpha's introduction, like you gotta like, he's not really mentioned in part one, but everybody who has read the book knows like how important this character is and how important it is to get him right and to establish him. And they do such a great job with the way they portray Getty Prime, the Harkonnen homeworld, with the black and white infrared photography. It's just, you just don't see that in movies. You just don't see that sort of formal ambition that this movie was operating on in these big blockbusters. And like I hate to beat a dead horse. I have seen two movies this year, both which cost about the same amount of money. One is Argyle, and the other is this.
Yeah.
See how far Dune Part 2 went with the same amount of money. It defies description.
It's insane.
Like, I can't fathom what happened.
When you put it
Not an
down,
Argyle review, but I just had to throw that out there because they both cost around the same amount of money.
no, honestly, when you put it in that scale, like, I'm not someone that likes to put people in director jail, but maybe the filmmakers of Argyle should watch Dune Part 2 and say, man, we can't make a CGI cat look good. What are we doing here? But yeah, but I digress. Something I want to touch on with what you said. That scene where Paul first rides the sandworm, there are two moments this decade so far that have like made like the hair on my arms like stand up because I was so impressed with filmmaking. One was the Trinity test last year from Oppenheimer, and two was Paul's first ride. Like, you are watching this and it truly feels like wondrous, and like you are watching like a moment of like, you see the sand like kicking back, like you see the wind in Timothée Chalamet's hair, like you completely understand like the struggle of like, if he doesn't get this, like what am I, like everything has failed, and just the moment when he succeeds and seeing everyone's like reaction, like I think like Zendaya, who like the character of Shawnee at that point had been so skeptical of the character of Paul, and just that brief moment of just her thinking like, is he actually the one? Can he do this? I think is absolutely incredible. And yeah, like when you go to Getty Prime and they set up like, oh, this planet has a black sun, so it looks all black and white, and just that whole like style and just how the Harkonnens all look, just being completely bathed in white, I think is just perfect. One of the elements I want to get on that I love about this movie is it picks up right where part one ended so perfectly. Like maybe like at most like a month has passed since the ending of part one, and you see that like Paul and Lady Jessica are now like have now completely assimilated into the world of the Fremen. They're now trying to take out different Harkonnens. You see that there are different points of Arrakis with Princess Rulin, played by Florence Pugh, and her father, played by Christopher Walken. How did you think, did this movie pick up where Dune Part 1 ended well for you? Like, do you think that was a good, like, did Denis Villeneuve do a good job like getting you right back into the world?
I do. It helped a lot that I rewatched part one. I think a lot of people rewatched part one in anticipation of part two, and that's I think that was the right decision, because it really does help. Yeah, because you get like at the end when you get kind of the Star Wars moment where, like Star Wars, it's like you're about to step into the wider world, and here where Chani's like, this is only the beginning. Like, it's Star Wars straight up ripped that off. And and you get Paul like seeing, and it's like he says desert power. It's like, which desert power, just a great phrase. And yeah, like you get this and then you get that this is only the beginning, and then it just goes into and then just builds on everything so well from there. And it was an interesting decision to open with a brand new character in Princess Irulan, sort of recapping a little bit of what happened and sort of introducing us to this other part of the world. And it's like, it is only beginning because they're expanding the world. We get more of the Imperium. We get more of the political intrigue with the Emperor and the Bene Gesserit. And it's just, it really does feel seamless. Like, I feel like there should be like a full Dune cut at some point. Like, you can go to a movie theater and just watch the whole 5 hours. Like, I hope that happens someday, because like I'd have to talk to my girlfriend, but I'm pretty sure I would love to do that.
I would totally. If they do like Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 as a double feature, I'm there immediately at the theater. The closest thing I can think of recent memory is, I think, like, if you watch it, at the very least, the first 3 John Wicks all back to back, I think it really helps because they literally take place like seconds after each other, and like Chapter 4 takes place maybe like a little bit after Chapter 3, but like just in the same way how with this movie, I think it just picks up so perfectly, and it just helps you get right back into the action. Let's talk about some of the returning characters and returning performances. It's so interesting. I thought the cast of Dune 1, I think it was really, really well cast. And something rare, I think, with this movie is I don't think there's a single actor in this movie that does not improve upon their performance from the original movie. Like, Timothée Chalamet played Paul Atreides, and it's so funny. When he was first cast as Paul, watching that movie, I was like, okay, Timothée Chalamet playing this version of Paul makes sense because he's someone that comes from privilege. He doesn't want to be in this role. But my whole thought process was, is he going to be able to pull off this like strong leader that's like starting to become corrupted with power very well? And I think he absolutely nailed this. Like, you completely understand why these people would follow him, why certain people would be skeptical, because you start to see the darkness in his soul. I think Zendaya, obviously, she has so much more screen time in this movie, so she's a lot more to sink her teeth in this film. Javier Bardem as Stilgar. I'm not sure about your audience. He got a lot of laughs from us, and like there were so many, like, really funny moments of him, like, oh, the Lisa Alghoub ate today. It is written, he is the one. And just like every time that happened, I think he was really used in like the very few moments of comedic relief. I think he really nailed down well. Josh Brolin has more to do this time. Rebecca Ferguson is once again great. What do you think about the returning cast, Jake?
I would agree with you. I think one of the things that I hesitate to say held back Dune Part 1, but I think one of the criticisms I understood about Dune Part 1 was some of the characters didn't really pop maybe as much as some people would have liked. And I think now, having seen Part 2, it definitely feels like more synchronous, I would say. Yeah, I agree with you that everybody, I think, really improved, especially Timothée Chalamet, because I've been sort of skeptical of him as an actor overall. Like, I think he's done very good work. I think he picks really good work, except for Don't Look Up, but I think that's another story entirely. Like, he always he works with really interesting directors. There's the nugget that always goes around where he got the advice from Leo, which is no hard drugs and no superhero movies. And I think, I don't know if he will be the heir to Leo. I don't think he quite I think he's I don't know, because Leo was kind of a pretty boy for a long time, and then he aged and became more of a character actor. And it'll be interesting to see if Timothée Chalamet is able to do that as well, because I think he's really impressive in Part 2. Like you said, that character arc that Paul goes on, where it ends, where he's arguably the bad guy.
Yeah. Is he the hero anymore? Like, I'm not sure.
And yeah, and you buy it the whole time. And even to a lesser extent, Lady Jessica, Rebecca Ferguson as well, similar path that she goes down. And you compare that to Zendaya, who gets something to do. Like that was something too. Like Zendaya, like she is coming off Euphoria, was getting a lot of buzz for that, I think. And I was like, I don't like the show, but I think she's incredible in it.
Fair.
And yeah, like this is like she is showing that like that hype was warranted, and she's really just a great foil for Chalamet in this, always questioning, always holding him accountable, or at least trying to. And I think it's a really good dynamic that works. Maybe some of the romance stuff isn't quite as gripping, but you also buy the what happens at the end with those two characters. Like you really feel it. And I think that's a big credit to Zendaya that she sells that. And yeah, you're right about Bardem. I was going to say he was kind of a scene stealer.
Yeah.
In this, like, yes, he is funny, but it also it really helps to sell what is happening with Paul at the Fremen, this Lisan al Gaib. I just want to say at some point, I don't know where else I can say it. You could play a drinking game with this movie where the one rule is they say Lisan al Gaib, you take a sip. I don't know if you make it to the end.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, you're dead. Yeah, Sanal Gaib, you take a shit, you take a sip, and Muad'Dib, you take a shot. You're gonna be dead. You're gonna be dead.
An hour and a half. You might you have a really strong liver. But it just really goes to show like. Yeah, just the whole movie. I think the character development was a big improvement in this one from part one. It was kind of the one thing that held me back in part one. I think in part two, that was amended, if you will, improved upon in every way. I was really invested in every character in a way that in part one, I was just kind of coasting on the visuals for a lot of it.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
But this time I was invested in the story and the characters wholeheartedly.
Yeah, in part one, I feel like that's kind of like the closest thing we'll get in this franchise to a hero's journey with Paul. And then in part two is a complete deconstruction of that whole hero's journey of saying, like, is this guy really the savior this world needs? Like, should we be wary of outsiders coming in? And I just think the way how Villeneuve is perfectly able to adapt that writing, I think works really, really well. Without getting into spoilers, there was a reveal that is technically in the first half of the book of Dune about Lady Jessica that I think Villeneuve wisely decided to save for this movie. And I think that is handled very, very well. I want to get into some of the newer cast members. Before we talk about the big major like kahuna, let's talk about some of the other people. I think if there is maybe a few criticisms, I think one could argue the movie might slightly underuse Florence Pugh and Christopher Walken. Like, not saying that they're bad by any means in the movie, but I think like when you cast those people, I think you expect them to be in like a huge part of the movie, and I think they're sort of like the more reserved characters, which I think is just insane to say that Christopher Walken is one of the more reserved characters in this movie. But I think him as the Emperor is kind of a reserved. But yeah, I do think they did like do their job. But I think walking in the movie, I was like, man, I wish we could have had maybe a little bit more with him, especially Florence Pugh. But I do think in Dune Part 3, we are going to get more of that character. What did you think about those two actors in particular in this film?
Yeah, it's hard to judge, particularly Florence Pugh's character, because she does become so much more important in Dune Messiah. I haven't read the book, but I've read a little bit about it, and yes, like that character's importance becomes more elevated. And then, yeah, with Walken, I think he was a little bit miscast.
I agree.
And I think that's really my one sort of nitpick I have about this movie is if you get Christopher Walken, you want him to do Christopher Walken things.
Yeah.
Even in I don't know if you've seen the show Severance.
Yeah.
So he's a more restrained character, but he's still doing Christopher Walken things.
Yeah.
And he's very eccentric and weird. And like you kind of want that. Whereas like this, you don't really get that. You get it from his cadence, but that's because he's Christopher Walken and he can't help himself.
Yeah.
And even in his elder years. I think Florence Pugh is just somebody like I know there are some people who are not a big fan of her. I'm not one of those people.
I'm not one of those either.
I think she's incredible as an incredibly talented performer, and I think she's somebody I can't wait to see it, but well, we'll see. Like I don't want to give away too many spoilers about Dune Messiah. I will say there's a time jump, and it makes you wonder, like, are they going to keep these actors? Because it's that big of a time jump. And I think with her, like, you want her doing that, and you also get, like, I think in particular, her reaction to, like, oh, you're with the big kahuna we're going to get to, like, really, that guy? He's psychotic.
Yeah.
And she sells that. That's kind of like her moment. And I think a lot of what is doing the work for her is her costumes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the costumes are so good in this movie, and like
they're amazing. And I think the Imperium costumes, in particular, like just the absolute gaudiness they really show. Like, I think that's really well done. Those costumes. I think they're doing a lot of the work, in particular for Pugh's character. But yeah, I feel like that's sort of the one part where it's like it's kind of hard to judge.
Yeah,
because the characters are very much like lower on the totem pole in terms of importance to the story.
I would definitely agree. It's something funny you said about Walken, and something I was just thinking, like, as great as Skarsgård is as Baron Harkonnen, like, I think, like, the character of Baron Harkonnen is the type of character we would hope Walken would be playing. Like, he is the character that, like, the first point he comes up, like, could not be a more, like, disgusting human being. Like he literally looks like the human equivalent of Jabba the Hutt. And, like, I love the design of Baron Harkonnen and, like, the Harkonnens in general. And speaking of the Harkonnens, let's just get into Austin Butler. Like, I think the perfect thing about Fade Rautha is, like, we hear mention of him before his introduction with Princess Aurelian literally saying, like, you want me to marry him? He's psychotic. Like, so we sort of get, like, the whole, like, feeling of, like, okay, this guy is probably going to be, like, crazier than some of the characters we see. And even from the moment we see where he's, like, preparing to, like, go out into, like, a gladiatorial fight, and he's just, like, with his tongue all out, he's, like, getting prepared to fight, and you're like, oh, there's something about this guy. And it's so funny. Like, I think the two major things we've seen Austin Butler in, well, okay, I'll say three, because he's a bit part of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But the two, like, major parts are Elvis and Dune Part 2. And those parts, he could not be more significantly different. And I think Warner Brothers deciding, regardless of what you think about Elvis, to put stock in this guy is maybe one of the best decisions I think they could have made, because he sells the insanity and the absolute, like, sadistic nature of this character so well. Like, from that moment we see it, if you've seen the trailers, where he goes out into this Coliseum, and, like, and at first he's just going out there because he thinks he's going to be able to kill, like, some easy prey for his birthday. And then when you realize, oh, one of the people isn't drugged, and I think he's just so perfect. Like, he sells that so perfectly. And I saw an article today that said he was, people are saying Fade Rautha is the best movie villain since Anton Chigurh and the Joker. I think we're putting a little bit of disrespect on Hans Landa from Inglourious Basterds, so let's calm down from there. But no, I think Austin Butler is so phenomenal as the character of Fade Rautha. What did you think about him?
Yeah, my feelings on the work of Baz Luhrmann are very well known. In a negative sense. I made it 30 minutes into Elvis and I had to turn it off.
You had to turn it off.
I will say, though, it was not Austin Butler's fault.
No.
Like, So I don't really know. I didn't really know much about him like you. I'd seen him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was in like a couple episodes of Arrow back when I watched the Arrowverse shows. But I didn't really know much about him. And it's like, okay, this guy, we're going to crown this guy. But yeah, the thing with Fade Ralph, though, that I think he really sells well, you have no idea what he's going to do moment to moment.
No.
And that's what makes him terrifying. Like, even in that opening scene, like when he kills a servant who like does something like innocuous, but he's just like, no, I'm just going to kill him.
Yeah,
like
you're
right there. That's when you're like, oh, he's that guy. And I have no idea what he's going to do moment to moment, but I'm really interested to find out. And that's where I think that's where he shines in this movie. I think that's why as soon as he's introduced about an hour into the movie,
probably say around that,
a little later than I was expecting, but once you get him, you're kind of waiting. If you're like, okay, when's Fade Ralph coming? And then when he does come, it's amazing. Like the whole scene we talked about earlier, the scene on Getty Prime, the whole gladiator scene, and just what a visual feast it is. But yeah, it's also down to him and the absolute glee when he finds out that this guy isn't drugged and he's actually going to get a real challenge. It's just it's fantastic, and he's really great. And every time, like, just everything after that is just, yeah, he really brings it. And I love how he sort of makes his voice kind of like his uncle. Like, he sort of sounds like Baron Harkonnen, and it's just slimy is just the word. Like, when I think of his voice, obviously couldn't be more different from Elvis, thank goodness, because if Fade Ralph had talked like Elvis, it would have taken me out of this. Thank God he finally got rid of Elvis from his brain. I just think that, that's hyperbole that he's that tier. I think we might need a little bit of distance to where we rank him in terms of villains, but certainly if we're talking like a recent blockbuster history, in terms of impact and like cultural impact and a memorable turn, I would say that it's entirely fair to heap all kinds of praise on Austin Butler, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. I'm very interested in that movie, The Bike Riders, that's coming out later this year, because that seems like, okay, that's him trying to do like a full movie star turn where he's doing like the full like biker greaser guy, like super like charismatic, handsome, like about a complete 180 from Fade Ralph, which is a character part. Yeah, he's like completely immersing himself in the makeup, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes, because based off of this, it's like, I'm interested in what he's gonna do, because clearly capable of a lot.
This is not confirmed, but there are a lot of rumors that he might be playing Val Kilmer's character in Heat 2. And seeing his performances that he's given, I'm like, okay, I'm in. Like, if Austin, like, this is a guy that, regardless of what you think about him, he gives 100% into his characters. Like, he is just fully in character, and like, I think that is what brings the character of Fade Ralph to life so much. Is like, while I'm watching it, like, a lot of the characters in Dune Part 2 are usually playing like slightly more reserved characters, and he is the one where I think Denis Villeneuve just said, go nuts, and if you need to, just ham it up. And he's giving the perfect amount of amount of energy to it. It's funny when he's first introduced and when he kills a servant, it does one of the things I love where like So I'm not sure about you. I still get physical tickets when I go to the movie theater, and when he does that, I like reach into my pocket and I'm just like, what is this movie rated again? And I was like, this movie definitely pushes the PG-13 rating a bit, and I'm like, yeah, good on you, Villeneuve. Before we head into just some final things, I just want to tackle some of the technical stuff again. Like, it cannot be talked about just how much of a technical marvel this movie is. Like, I think with the first movie, I really got into like how good the CG looks and how just big everything feels. I think with this movie, I was really just appreciating all the practical stuff. Like Like you said, the costumes are amazing. The production design and the sets, whether it is on Arrakis or whether it is on Getty Prime. When you first meet Princess Aurelian, I feel like I'm mispronouncing her name.
I believe it's Irulan.
Irulan, yes. When you first meet Princess Irulan and she's in like this like beautiful garden and it's like nothing that we've seen so far, I'm just like, I love it when a sequel, especially with like a science fiction sequel, can give us like completely new environments and new locations. I think this movie did that wonderfully. And yeah, once again, like I feel like saying that Hans Zimmer is giving a good score like feels like, oh wow, this Roger Deakins shot movie looks good. Like, but it cannot just be stress enough how incredible like Hans Zimmer makes like those like French horn sound with this movie, and just whenever like those like chants come in, it just feels so epic. Like real quick, like is there anything you want to talk about the technical elements of this movie that we haven't tackled yet?
I want to give a special shout out to Greg Fraser, the cinematographer. I think, other than Villeneuve, I think he's the star of these movies.
Yes.
Like, I think this is. I think he won the Oscar for Part One, deservedly so. I think he's one of the best cinematographers working right now. Like, when I see that a movie is shot by him, I immediately become more interested. It's like I was already excited for The Batman, and then I saw Greg Fraser was shooting it. I was like, great. Even better. Yeah, I just think that and making it, we have this idea of what like an epic desert movie is supposed to look like, whether it's Star Wars or even going further back, Lawrence of Arabia, I think, and that's a movie that has come up with Dune Part 2, where it's like, oh, this is the Lawrence of Arabia of sci-fi. I can see why people are making that comparison, both for the setting and for the way that the character of Paul is portrayed. I hesitate to go there, but
yeah,
it's hard not to, because it's just every frame is a painting, and you, even with there being a lot of CGI in this, it's never the primary part of a scene. Like, it's always something in camera, it's always something tactile. The CGI is window dressing, and the focus is always on what's in the camera. And I think that's what a lot of big blockbuster movies seem to forget these days. But Denis Villeneuve is fanatically committed to making sure our focus is what's actually on screen as opposed to what's put in with a computer later. And I think it's just, I can't stress enough how much I love that. And Greg Fraser, I think, gets a lot of credit for that. And like you were talking about, the costumes, the sets, and yeah, Hans Zimmer. Like, I think when people think of Hans Zimmer, they think of like the Nolan, his stuff with Christopher Nolan, or Pirates of the Caribbean.
Gladiator, my favorites.
Gladiator. I mean, Lion King. This is right up there. Like, for me, when you finally get the woman's voice, the chanting.
Yeah. It's like
they hold off on it, but when it comes, ooh, chef's kiss. It's just a perfect moment. And yeah, it's just, everybody here is just at the absolute top of their game. It's like, this is what you get when you get people who are really passionate about what they're making. Like, Hans Zimmer and Denis Villeneuve in particular have been on record as like, we have loved Dune since we were children. This is our dream project. This is what we wanted to do our whole careers, is bring Dune to life. And you feel it. And in every sweaty, sandy pore of this movie, that passion that you don't feel with a lot of other blockbusters, where it definitely feels like somebody's just hired to do it. Villeneuve makes it feel like this is his passion project. It's a $200 million passion project.
Yeah.
And a franchise. But it still feels personal.
I remember when Blade Runner 2049 was coming out, and when that movie was first announced, I was really hesitant because I was like, why do we need a sequel to Blade Runner? It feels so complete. And Denis Villeneuve had a quote when that movie was coming out where he said, I signed on to do this because I didn't want anyone else to fuck it up. And then after watching Arrival, I was like, and seeing Sicario and Prisoners beforehand, I was like, okay, you know what? If anyone's going to do this, I'm happy it's you. Let's see what you got. And I love 2049. And then just now knowing that, like, even though that movie didn't do too well, the studios trusted him to say, like, you have an eye and you are talented. You can do whatever you want. And he said, yeah, I want to do Dune. It's like, there are two projects. There are two major like properties that I've heard growing up have been like unadaptable. One of them is Watchmen, and the other is Dune. And all I will say is I think Villeneuve understands and was able to bring to life Dune a lot better than Zack Snyder did with Watchmen. In my humble opinion, I know a lot of people love Watchmen. I'm not the biggest fan of that movie. I think there are certain things it does well, but we're not talking about Zack Snyder. Yeah. Before we head out, I just want to say, I think this movie sets up part 3 perfectly, where part one set up part 2 also in a really good way. I think part 2 definitely feels itself a little more towards the end, where it's like, yeah, we know we're getting a part 3, so we're really gonna leave you on like a, oh man, this is where we're ending. And I thought the cliffhanger at the end was really, really good. Like I hesitate to call it a cliffhanger because it has a complete like ending. Like the story to this movie is complete, but like, you know, some other things are going to happen. What did you think about the ending of this movie?
Yeah, I agree. Like it definitely, like with everything that's happening thematically in the movie, it comes to a really good fitting endpoint. Yeah, like, and you said, while also setting up like, okay, we kind of know where we're going from here, like teasing an even wider world than what we already get. Because part 1, there's a little bit on Getty Prime, but it's mostly Caladan and Arrakis.
Mm-hmm.
And they introduce more locations here, and I feel like it's only going to keep going from here. And as long as Denis Villeneuve is on board, so am I.
Mm-hmm.
I know he said that he only wants to do Dune Messiah, and then peace out and do other stuff, which I can't say I blame him, considering can't even imagine how hard it is to make one of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, he is the draw. Like, no matter all the amazing people in this cast and Hans Zimmer, no, Denis Villeneuve is the star of Dune.
Yeah.
And as long as he is involved, I think the anticipation level for whenever the next Dune movie comes out, because I don't think it's going to be as soon as people want. I think it's going to be, I think he's going to make something else, and at least one other movie in the meantime before the third Dune movie comes out. So it'll be interesting to see the anticipation level, where it's at when the next Dune movie comes out, because I think the proof of concept is there that these are two incredible movies. And I think that they're going to have an impact on culture in a way that I never saw coming. Where like, the part 2 is going to be a huge hit. Like one of the highest grossing movies of the year. I don't know if it's going to get a B, just because I don't think movies make $1 billion anymore. So like, not at the level that they did pre-pandemic. Like I think last year only 2 movies made $1 billion. Yeah, so I don't know if it'll get there, but it's going to be one of the highest grossing movies of the year, and it's going to deserve it because it's such an incredible achievement. I want more. And I think most people do too after seeing this. Like it's just an incredible achievement.
I like living in a world where blockbusters can be this good, and when you have auteurs behind these huge movies. Are you good to get into final ratings?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, here at Cinemasters Reviews, we review movies on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is absolutely awful. 10 is absolutely incredible. I think we might have something that's never been done before. Let's see what happens. Jake, what would you give Dune Part 2 on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes?
I don't know if I can do it. Do we do half tapes?
Yes. There are half tapes.
Okay. Part of me wants to give it a 10, but man, you know what? But I think I need to see it again to really make sure. But in the meantime, I will do 9.5. There's no doubt that on a technical level, this movie is astonishing and a standard that I think other movies need to be held against. Other movies at this scale. I think this is the standard right now for what is possible with blockbuster movies and reasons to get butts and seats. Like, this movie is worth, if you don't have a Stubbs A-list pass like Payson and I do, it is worth the $20+ to go to IMAX. Like, you're paying for this $25 or whatever in IMAX, and you're paying like 10 times that to go see someone in concert who's not nearly as entertaining as this movie. It's like, this is a really good use of your money. And the acting is great, the visuals are great, the music is great, and it's just great to have something that the monoculture can rally around again, because our culture is so fragmented now, and it's great to have something this good be something embraced by so many people.
Yeah, that was really eloquently said. I think what you said was wonderful. You said you couldn't quite go the 10. I'm not going to be as reserved as you. I am going to give it that 10 out of 10. I think this is even better than the first one. I think it is it's going to go down as one of the great sequels. Walking out of this film, it's so weird to me to think of Oppenheimer as a blockbuster. So I am going to use my language in the best way I can. I think this is the best franchise blockbuster in the past since 2015. Since Mad Max Fury Road, I think this is the best franchise blockbuster I have seen since Mad Max Fury Road. I want to say blockbuster. I can't say that with Oppenheimer, but yeah, I think this is everything I want with movies, specifically big budget movies, where you take these huge ideas but you make them so watchable to the mainstream audience. You have incredible visuals, you have incredible characters, you have this incredible world, and you are once again seeing Denis Villeneuve prove himself to be one of the great directors working today. I love that I know that I am in the process of witnessing a great in his prime, and like every time he's putting out a movie, it is now going to feel like an event, and I think that's awesome. I've said this before. I don't want them to make a live action Akira movie. If anyone was going to do it, Denis Villeneuve is the person I would say, okay, if he is doing it, I am at least going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think this is I don't like to throw around the M word for a blockbuster. This is a masterpiece. Jake, it looks like you said you wanted to say something when I was talking. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, like, thinking about, is it really the best blockbuster of the last 9 years since Fury Road? And I'm kind of like, yeah, I think it might be. Mm-hmm. As some of the biggest Fury Road fan I know is me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to say something lives up to that, but yeah, it might be it. This might be the Lisan al-Gaib of blockbusters.
I'll absolutely take that. I do love that. Well, with you being such a big Fury Road fan, I do think I know a movie I am going to be having you review later this year with me. But I say we head out right away. Jake, before we head out, is there anything you want to plug?
Nah, man.
Okay.
I don't do social media. I don't have my own little outlet. Just support Payson. Just go watch movies. Just go watch this movie. That's my plug. Go see this movie on the biggest screen you can. See it more than once. I know it's making David Zaslav richer, probably, but the movie's too good.
It's
something about that.
Yeah, it's a pendulum. Think that you're supporting the artist, not the producer. It's tricky, but yes, please go watch this movie, especially in the biggest theater you can. Like this video, subscribe to the video store. It helps us out a lot. And I'm gonna echo the sentiment that Jake just said, and the sentiment that I say at the end of all these videos: watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.